Good morning, Chairman.
Good morning and welcome to this online meeting of the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Bob Adams and I'm the chairman of the meeting. This is a formal public meeting and the audio feed of this meeting is being broadcast via the County Council's website. I would like to welcome members of the press and public who are listening to this online. Before we begin, I would like to confirm who is present. Steve Blake from Democratic Services will ask members to indicate their presence after their name is called. When invited to speak, you should unmute your microphones and switch on your video. When you are not participating in the meeting, please make sure you have muted your microphone and switched off your video. Steve Blake, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, members, when I call out your name, just indicate your presence. Bob Adams obviously is here.
Present.
Tom Ashton.
Present.
Wendy Bowkett.
Present.
Chris Brewis.
Present.
Jackie Brockway. We'll come back to Jackie, Chairman. Rodney Grocock.
Present.
Robin Renshaw.
Present.
Stephen Rowe.
Present.
Adam Stokes.
Present.
Eddie Strengle.
Present.
Mark Whittington.
Present.
And I believe we've got the two executive councillors here, Chairman, Councillor Richard Davies.
And they will be introduced at the beginning of the item. I would like to ask members of the committee and other participants to type speak in the chat when you wish to ask a question or make a contribution. And those requests will be collated by Councillor Rowe, the Vice Chairman. I would ask, we have a long agenda and be grateful, and I'm sure the Vice Chairman will be grateful if questions and contributions can be succinct and concise. Also, just a reminder, please turn off your camera and microphone when not participating in the meeting. And I also ask that members who are intending to leave the meeting indicate using the chat function. Officers do not need to do so. Okay, we'll move on to the formal agenda. Steve, any apologies for absence, please?
All present and correct, apart from Councillor Jackie Brockway, but one assumes she'll announce her presence when she arrives in the meeting, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Item 2, direct declarations of members' interest. Do members, any members have interest to declare other than those in the register of interest? If so, type speak in the meeting, in the chat meeting. And any indication in the chat function? No. I'll take that as a no then. Minutes of the item 3 on the agenda. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 14th of September. This is to confirm the minutes of the meeting as a correct record. I will quickly go through them page by page. So the first item is, well, these seem to be in the wrong order. I've got these in the wrong order. So I won't go through them page by page. Any amendments for accuracy on the minutes, please?
Yes, Chair. I've indicated on
Yes, please, Robin.
Sorry, on page 8.
Yep.
The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet point down. It was requested with reassurance. That's how it starts. I would just like one word changing and one word removing to read. It was confirmed that this was always taken into consideration. Then that will please my constituents. It makes it confirms it more strongly than those words indicate, and that's what I felt was the feeling of the meeting, that they were supportive of that.
Sorry, Chairman, what minute number is that?
It's the 4th bullet point.
Minute number. What's the minute number, please?
13.
Thank you.
Could you, just for clarity, Robin, would you mind repeating that, please?
No problem. Yeah.
Where so that bullet point should read what, please, Steve?
Do you want me to go where it says?
Yeah, do the whole bullet point for clarity. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the fourth one down. It was requested whether assurance could be given that in future major schemes there would be mitigation to prevent rat running by HGVs on suitable routes. That's no problem. From then onwards, just remove the however and put in it was confirmed that this was always taken into consideration during the planning of major projects. It just makes it stronger, Chairman.
Okay. Any member, Steve or Daniel, any problem with that?
Not from me, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Daniel?
No, not from me.
Okay, so with that amendment, are members happy to confirm the minutes as correct?
Yeah. Okay.
Do we need to take the formal vote, Steve?
Yes, we do, Chairman. I'll read the names out. Apparently, Councillor Brockway is now in the meeting, Chairman.
Fine. Morning, Jackie.
Good morning, Chairman. Sorry about that IT problem.
No problem.
Right, members, I'll read out the names just to get approval of the minutes now, please. Councillor Bob Adams.
4.
Councillor Tom Ashton.
4.
Councillor Wendy Bowkett.
4.
Councillor Chris Brewis.
4.
Councillor Rodney Grocott.
4.
Councillor Robin Renshaw.
4.
Councillor Stephen Rowe.
4.
Councillor Adam Stokes.
4.
Councillor Eddie Strengle.
4.
Councillor Mark Whittington. I didn't read Councillor Brockway's name out, Chairman, because I think she just arrived in the meeting when we concluded that. Or did she hear it? I don't know.
Chairman, I'm not sure what you're voting on. I'm sorry, because I didn't hear that.
On the minutes.
Oh, yes,
Councillor
I'm
Brockway.
4. 4. I'm 4.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. We move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. 2 or 3 quick things, points from my situation. I will be leaving the meeting early. I have to take my wife to Peterborough Hospital by 12:30. That's subject to no cancellations or postponements between now and then. And the Vice Chairman, Councillor Rowe, will take over. We will be moving item, which is your item 6 on the agenda. We'll be bringing that forward as the next item to accommodate our friends and colleagues from Network Rail who have other duties to move on to. And we do have a member of the Minster resident group, Minsterfield resident group, who will be speaking to us under item 5. I have had a conversation with Mr. Porter over the weekend, just so he understands that yes, he can come and talk to us for a few minutes to voice his concerns, but that no decision can be made by this committee going forward. But his comments and notes will be noted for future reference, and it is to do with the provision of footways and footpaths over major road schemes. So with that, can I go on to the Executive Councillors? Councillor Richard Davis or Cleo Barrington-Williams, any comments that you wish to make or any announcements, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one this morning. I know parking enforcement and civil parking enforcement are topics that this committee has looked at on a number of occasions, and it's something that a lot of members are very passionate about. I'm pleased to report that this year Lincolnshire County Council has won the Patrol Park Awards. What that means, out of all the parking enforcement organisations in the country, all local authorities that do it, our annual report was graded the best, so much so that it's actually been mentioned by the chairman of the Transport Select Committee, Hugh Merriman MP. It's a real achievement for the team, actually. It's perhaps one of the most difficult services we deliver. Depending on who you speak to across the county, we either do too much or too little. But I know, and we've visited in your area in particular, Mr. Chairman, areas that have been blighted by careless and reckless and potentially dangerous parking. So I'm pleased that our officers and the management team have been recognised for the good works they do on this.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I'm sure members of the committee will wish you to pass on our thanks and congratulations to them for that achievement. Cleo? No response from Cleo, so I'll assume there's no announcement that Cleo wishes to make. Are there any officer announcements? Karen?
No announcements, Chairman.
Thank you, Karen. So if we can then move on to item 6. Rail franchise. I'm hoping Jason Coppett or Jane Wingate are with us. Could I ask either one of those please to introduce this item on the agenda? And I have been asked to request members to ask their questions as they go along, bearing in mind that the Network Rail team need to move on to other business of theirs. So please be concise and please be brief. Jason or Jane, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's Jason here. Good morning. First, just to introduce myself, I'm the new Transport and Growth Manager at the Council. So I think this is week number 5 for me. Yeah, just getting used to this. Is the first scrutiny panel I've obviously been to. All I'm really going to say is that along with many other industries, this year has been a very difficult one. It's been particularly difficult, I think, for the rail industry. They lost about 95% of their patronage within about 2 days at the beginning of the announcement of the lockdown, and that has made planning and everything that they're doing actually very, very difficult to try and achieve over the year. I'll hand over to Jane, who's just going to quickly run through the various people who are here today and introduce the members from the rail industry.
Okay, good morning, everybody. This morning we have got 4 rail items. We're going to start with the Department for Transport for an update of the impact of COVID-19 and the Williams review and transition from rail franchising. We then have East Midlands Railway, who will give an update on our regional rail services and specifically regarding the joint line that runs between Doncaster, Lincoln and Peterborough. We then have an update from Network Rail on all matters associated with the highway and the rail network. And then last but not least, we have Midlands Connect, who will be giving us an update on the line speed improvement works between Lincoln and Nottingham. Very exciting project. So without further ado, may I introduce Eddie Marasco, who is Deputy Director for the Department for Transport for the Midlands, Wales and North Market. Thank you, Eddie.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you very much. And thank you to Jane for organising this opportunity to speak to you. It's a great pleasure to be able to give you an update direct. I'll just briefly explain my role. In the department, I oversee the management of 3 DFT franchises, East Midlands, Cross Country and West Midlands. And that's the not just the in-life management, but also any team that's undertaking a franchise competition or renewal or direct award of a franchise. I have a team dedicated to each franchise of commercial, contract and finance managers. And also with East Midlands, we've just begun the partnership with Transport for East Midlands, and they're recruiting a stakeholder manager with whom we are going to work more closely. So I'm going to update on 4 main areas for you, and then hopefully have time for questions at the end. I'll talk firstly about the short-term service effects that COVID has had on us, then the medium-term impact of COVID. Then I'll just explain a bit about the contractual changes that have been caused by COVID, and then just provide a bit more background context about some of the longer-term challenges. So to take short-term service impacts first, obviously we had a severe downturn in March of patronage, and we put in place emergency timetables, or the operators put in place emergency timetables as a result of the falling patronage and also of the issues of staff availability. The timetables have then been gradually restored back since then, with uplifts in May, July and September, to the point where East Midlands Rail in particular got back to a place where they had 97% of their normal services back being run, because their absenteeism had basically reached normal levels. Unfortunately, there's now been a rise in absenteeism, which I imagine my colleagues from East Midlands Rail will talk about, which has meant there's been a slight paring back of services, because the overall message that the department has given throughout the summer is, and in terms of timetables going forward, is that franchisees should only plan to operate services that they can reliably deliver. And that's really important, because one of the beneficial side effects of COVID has been the fact that the actual rail performance has been much, much higher than it was before. And on East Midlands Rail, they've regularly been having 95% of success against what's called the public performance measure. So we want to see that maintained going forward. So that's been the short-term impact. In terms of the medium-term service impacts, obviously industry planning for big changes has been disrupted by the impact of COVID. Initially, there was delays caused to actual infrastructure delivery, and indeed, factories producing new trains were impacted. But also, of course, things like driver training had to be suspended because that couldn't take place safely with two people in a train cab. And also, the planners who work on big timetable changes had to devote an awful lot of time and really work themselves silly in terms of delivering the timetable changes through the summer. That there've never been so many timetable changes in such a short period of time that have needed to be delivered. So that's been a distraction for operators as well, and for Network Rail. So the upshot of that is that the major the implementation of train services to make use of the Midland Main Line upgrade, that was delayed from December 2020 and should now take place in May 2021. We also planned that in December 2021, firstly, that the Liverpool-Nottingham section of the Liverpool-Norwich service would transfer to TPE. That has had to be delayed because TPE are unable to facilitate that in time. And in conjunction with that, the upgrade in regional services, which I'm sure is of most interest to you in Lincolnshire, which was also due to take place in December 2021, this has also had to be delayed, and we'll have to have a look at that in the light of these other changes that have taken place. I think as part of this process of getting back to normal, one of the things that the ministers have been keen to prioritise is that we should put services back that work. They call it Build Back Better, but ultimately there is a desire that we don't just somewhat mindlessly put all the train services back that were there in the past, because the performance of the railway was clearly suffering from too many trains taking place. So we're working closely with Network Rail and the train operators to make sure that the service we provide in future is appropriate. Moving on to the third topic, which was the contractual impacts of COVID. Clearly, massive financial impact of the coronavirus on rail finances because of the sharp drop in patronage, while still trying to run as many train services as possible, particularly in terms of even though we have reduced demand, we're trying to provide maximum capacity to enable social distancing to take place. So as a result of that, the department had to take all the train companies onto what were called emergency measures agreements in March, where DfT basically took the full cost and revenue risk of running the franchise. These These EMAs lasted until September, and in September we replaced them with something slightly different called Emergency Recovery Measures Agreements, which had the same risk allocation, with DfT still taking the risk. But the main provision of that was that it actually enables the department and the franchisee to agree the termination of the underlying franchise agreements, which previously took place, which were previously in place. So that means that at the end of the emergency recovery measures agreements, ERMAs, all the incumbent operators will have the opportunity to negotiate what's called a directly awarded contract with the department. These are likely to be for the same duration as the underlying contract that was in place before. So in case of East Midlands Rail, it would be a directly awarded contract until 2028. Most of the risk, if not all the risk, in these directly awarded contracts will still be with the department, but it will intend to put the franchise on a stable longer-term footing. The idea then is that gradually from the kind of 2023-ish onwards, the department will be in a place where we can start to hold competitive lettings of franchises again, but on a different contractual model, with the department taking the revenue risk and the train operating companies being on cost risk, which is the same model that's worked on Transport for London. But that will be on a phased basis over many years during the 2020s. I should point out that this means that it's really a very big change for the industry, the biggest change since privatisation was brought in. It's a big change for the TOCs and for the department. The TOCs now are effectively much more directly our contractors. It used to be that they would sign up for 7 to 10 years of a contract. They'd have the committed obligations in place. They'd have their plans in place, and it would be their job to deliver those plans. And we'd keep a fairly light touch oversight of whether they were delivering to their contract. Now they are effectively spending taxpayers' money. They are directly on the public sector's books, and that means that they are more answerable to the department, and the department has to be skilled up to take on a different and more managerially controlling, in a way, role. That might be the wrong word, but you know what I mean. We're having to be more involved than we were before, and we are expanding our teams accordingly. And finally, just to note the wider challenges and changes that we have, there's the Williams review of rail franchising, which was due to have been published, but has been delayed due to COVID. And there have been many parliamentary questions about when that will happen, which ministers have been unable to answer, and I'm equally unable to answer, but it is still the intention to publish. But I think the ministers have been clear that irrespective of that, they want to get on with elements of the Williams agenda, particularly around things like fares reform, and the fact that the train companies are, because of COVID, on the department's kind of direct cost and revenue risk, means that something like fares reform would be perhaps easier to deliver than it would have been if we were having to undertake commercial negotiations with a dozen train operating companies. Clearly, there is finally the demand uncertainty into the future. Where will rail patronage get back to? Will it be different? Will there be fewer commuters? Will there perhaps be more leisure travellers than before? And the departments and operators and Network Rail are going to have to be really flexible in having plans to deal with various scenarios, which may or may not come about. And of course, behind all this is the really severe financial pressures of the country as a whole, and rail is just one relatively small part of that. But we will need to make our contribution as an industry to making sure we are delivering whatever services are needed as efficiently as possible. So that was going to be my very quick skirt through of key issues that are facing the department, its operators, and indeed Network Rail. And I'm more than happy to take questions if that would work for you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for this, Eddie. Steve, are there any members in the chat room wish to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Chris Brewis would like to speak.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very grateful for that report and also the difficult position we're in now. I think I'm also grateful to the fact that officers and Richard and his people from Lincolnshire make consistent messages about it. I was so delighted to see the improved services, for example, to Gainsborough Central. And when we got news that the services on the GNG joint line were going to be 2 shifts from this December to Lincoln to Peterborough and then on to Doncaster next year, we were getting rather excited. But the disincentives are now there when they've been government advice not to travel rail, and the difficulty of encouraging people back. And I see this crisis going on for some time, and the OLR being involved for what I'm going to call Office of Last Resort being involved for a substantial period of time. If you have any influence, I would suggest that we have to get the patronage up again. We have to make the service, it's a mixture of reliability and fares, make the service so attractive that the alternative, using a car, becomes unattractive. And that involves an enormous central government decision to decide that, in effect, not just for urban and city areas about which they're obsessed, but also more rural areas benefit from more people using public transport in the medium term. How that is achieved, I don't know, but I'd love to know when we're going to get the 2 shift services through, you now think, from Peterborough via Lincoln to Doncaster, and also whether we should still have decent services to Gainsborough Central. That's my initial questions. Thank you.
Okay, so shall we come back on that now?
Sorry, yeah, I think it'd be helpful if your colleagues need to move on, Eddie, to take the questions and deal with your presentation and any questions as we go. Yeah.
Okay, so just responding to that very quickly. I can't commit to a particular date when the uplift in regional services will be implemented. I'm afraid that's something we're working with the East Midlands Rail on. I mean, it shouldn't be that long. But I wouldn't like to put my hat on a particular date, I'm afraid. But your general point is exactly right. I mean, the best and most effective way to remedy the financial black hole of the railways at the moment is to fill the trains back up again where they were before. I mean, that is much easier than trying to instigate programs of service reductions or whatever. So that is definitely the prime intention. And in fact, train companies were gearing up for marketing campaigns, etc. Which, if things had continued to go well over the summer, they were doing this over the summer, and if COVID hadn't come back, I'm sure we'd have seen it by now. But those plans are on the stocks, and yes, the department ministers remain fundamentally committed to a policy whereby public transport and filling trains as much as we can is the way for both the environment and for the finances of the railway to improve. So that is definitely an intention.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Eddie. Any more questions or speakers, Steve?
Yeah, Councillor Tom Ashton.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much. The point I would make is to pick up on what I'm delighted to hear about building back better and taking whatever opportunity presented by current circumstance to improve on services rather than simply to reinstate them. And I'm also delighted to see what has been achieved with the timetabling over the last few months. And I think that just demonstrates what can be possible when minds are put to it. And I draw those 2 points together and say that if we're going to build back better, could we make full use of this opportunity to get connections and connecting timetables to work in I'd say in a better way than they do now, particularly on the intersection of the Skegness to Nottingham line, where it connects at Grantham. As I've said before, it's quite possible that if to sit on a train coming into Grantham station as the preceding connection has just left, and to be faced by about an hour's wait for the next one down to London, that makes a big difference on connectivity in the eastern part of Lincolnshire. And so if we're going to build back better, could we please give every attention to where we have intersecting services and get those connections to work even better, to get overall journey time lower, to make Lincolnshire more attractive for using the training, and absolutely, Councillor Bruce has just been saying, get people back on them trains as soon as it's safe and everyone's willing to do so.
Yes, I quite agree, Councillor Ashton. That's something we should certainly be aiming to do. And one of the side effects of what has happened is that we, as a train companies, can now cooperate proactively, whereas before that was discouraged, and it was commercially perhaps not always in their interest to do so. So the Irma agreements actually are explicit that they need to collaborate with Network Rail and with each other to provide the best possible timetables overall. So I can't promise anything on that specific, but there's an East Coast Main Line recast due in the next couple of years. And I'm sure we will want to ensure that all those elements fit together well. And now, like I say, one of the silver linings, and there aren't many of COVID, is that train companies are now incentivised and required to collaborate in a way they haven't been in the past. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Eddie. Steve, are there any more members wishing to speak or ask questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Eddie. Very much appreciate you coming forward with that update. Please feel free to stay at the meeting or move on to other things if you need to. And Jane, the next presentation is from, please.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Our next presentation is from East Midlands Railway, and we have Laura Etheridge and Max Taylor, who are going to give us an update about the regional services and the GNGE route. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Jane. Same procedure applies. At the end of the presentation, please ask your questions, and then those people from the rail companies can move forward. Okay, thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name is Max Taylor. I'm the Senior Commercial Strategy Manager for East Midlands Railway. And it's strange to be doing this virtually, as we've all had to adjust over the last couple of months, rather than being in the main room in Lincoln. But there we go. So 3 key points to canter through, and I'll try and keep this brief, as Eddie's done a good job of sort of summarising our current position. Firstly, just wanted to touch on the impact of COVID that it's had on EMR and our plans for the future. Secondly, a few words about what was originally our December 2020 planned improvements, which are now scheduled to May 21. And then finally, an update on the, as planned, December 2021 service enhancements, which are now delayed to a date unknown at this time. So firstly, a quick word on COVID. The impact that COVID has had cannot be overstated on EMR. Firstly, for all the contractual reasons that have just been outlined, which I don't intend to repeat, but at a more fundamental level, not only has our patronage essentially sharply fallen away, and it has been climbing back up slowly over recent months, but it has severely impacted our ability to provide the service. Today, despite having ramped back up to almost 97% of our booked timetable from early September, today we're in the very unfortunate position where we've had to withdraw 37 services from our timetable due to our inability to resource them. This is directly linked to the availability of train crew who are either self-isolating, who have become ill over the past few weeks and are isolating, waiting for test results. And this is against a backdrop of significant change ahead of our May 21 timetable and the need to recruit and train extra drivers, train drivers on new trains which are coming in to the region, and train drivers on new routes as well. And that significant level of churn and change, coupled with an increasing level of absence within our train crew establishment, as COVID levels start rising again, as there's been significant chokeholds which have been sort of well recorded publicly with the availability of tests, has meant that's had an unfortunate effect where we are not able to reliably run the services that we wish to. Echoing the words that we would rather reliably run advertised services and trim them back to a level that we know we can absolutely meet, rather than try on a daily basis but not know whether or not we're really going to be able to deliver all the services advertised. We have taken a decision starting today, obviously, that 37 services are withdrawn on a temporary basis, mostly protecting school trains, first trains, last trains, trains for key workers, so focused on middle of the day services where hopefully there are alternatives available to other customers to keep people moving across the region. Because that's the most immediate sort of impact that we've seen from COVID so far in terms of how we're delivering our service. So moving to our improvements that were scheduled for December 20. So as mentioned, these are now due to be introduced in May 21. I won't focus on the main Midland Main Line service enhancements, but of course for Lincolnshire in particular, we do intend to introduce, as originally consulted and advertised, additional services from Nottingham to Grantham and Skegness, including later evening services during the week and a full all year round summer Sunday timetable. So that's 10 return trips between Nottingham and Skegness rather than 4 in the winter. Additional services between Lincoln and Grimsby, so 2 hourly as today, but with earlier services and later services. And additional services between Lincoln and Peterborough as well. There's an additional round trip, and the Spalding shuttles from Spalding to Peterborough are extended along the full length of the joint line. There's also the additional through train from Lincoln to London in both directions, and an earlier train from Newark Northgate to Lincoln as well for early morning travellers. We expect to be releasing the results and our response to what was the original December 20 timetable consultation shortly, and further communications will be forthcoming when that is ready to be published on our website and to stakeholders. So then, December 21 timetable enhancements. At this point, we're unable to say when these will be introduced. There's 2 very good reasons for that. Firstly, as Eddie highlighted, the planning resource within the rail industry and sort of supported in the observation by Councillor Ashton has been working night and day to produce timetable iteration after timetable iteration in the last 6 months. And that has essentially been at the expense of long-term service development. And we are now in a position where we are able to pick up where we were for December 21. Not only have all the intermediate timetables between now and then stepped back, so has the development, so has the availability of drivers and the availability of driver instructors to train drivers on new trains. All of those factors come together to mean that it is highly unlikely that the improvements will be delivered in December 21 as planned. It is unlikely that we'll be able to deliver them in May 22. And at this point, we can't say exactly when they will be delivered. It may well be that we are able to deliver some improvements earlier than others, and we're currently working through that detail now to sequence when improvements can be made based on our known resource base. Focus for December 21, as well as an all-day through Peterborough, Doncaster via Lincoln, the GNGE service. Focus is on creating that connected Lincolnshire timetable, identifying where our largest flows of passengers are, identifying where journeys can be made by alternative public transport that the train can either do better or not as well, where there is no alternative public transport, and where sort of connections are most valued as well, and trying to pull that all together into a clear train plan, an hourly repeating standard train plan to make it usable across the EMR regional railway. It's also worth sort of flagging that around that uncertainty of the resource base and around the uncertainty of the timing, conversations will continue to be had between ourselves, the departments and other operators about not only the phasing of benefits December 21 timetable, but about whether or not some bits can be rethought, whether or not we can do various bits better, particularly with the East Coast recast, and trying to make as many journeys possible across Lincolnshire. And on that point, and echoing Eddie's words from earlier about us really now being, rather than arm's length contractors to the DfT, and now sort of almost direct contractors, we continue to listen through our new partnership with East Midlands councils and through our existing stakeholder bodies and forums, and we look forward to being able to respond in a much more agile way and a much more in a way that's perhaps more freely than we would have been able to before on our original contracts. And we think that is a definite upside of the new contractual arrangement between ourselves and the department. We look forward to being able to work with our colleagues at the department, Network Rail, other operators and stakeholders to make sure that when the December 21 timetable is delivered, it is a meaningful and proper enhancement to the regional railway. And that's it in terms of an update, and apologies I can't be more specific in terms of timescales and definite dates of improvement. I return the floor to you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. Questions or comments on that section, please, Steve?
Yeah, Councillor Chris Brewis.
Chris?
Yeah, briefly, I thank you very much for the presentation. We know times are difficult, and we began to get quite excited when initially the southern half from Lincoln to Peterborough was going to be a two-shift line, and then they won the northern half afterwards, which would take traffic off the road, enable people to travel from places like Spalding and Gainsborough to Lincoln and home for work and things like that. The sooner that can be brought into use, it's going to be enormous benefit to Lincolnshire. And the main thing I think people wanted, reliability, publicity about timetable alterations, and I suppose if all else fails, well, if you give me a bit of training, I'll try and drive one of them. But strength to your arm, and please expedite this improvement to what would be a two-shift line on the GNGE as soon as you possibly can. That's my real message, and it's a consistent message we've tried to make all through.
Thank you, Chris. Steve, any further contributions?
No further requests to speak. No.
Thank you, Steve.
Councillor Grove.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Grove
raised his hand.
Sorry, I didn't catch who it was.
Councillor Rodney Grocock has raised his hand to speak.
Thank you, Steve. Rodney?
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Max, for that report. In in respect of South Holland, Max, I'm hoping you're going to come up with some good answers to make the people of South Holland feel a bit more rail friendly, because at the moment they don't. South Holland is made up of small towns and villages. The rail service is extremely poor. The bus service is extremely poor. When British Rail announced the service between Peterborough and Lincoln via Spalding was going to be vastly increased, that was the best transport news South Holland residents had received for some time. Highways are managing to work exceptionally well during COVID, but British Rail gave the reason to postpone this service as COVID, but their decision was made when COVID figures were decreasing. The other services supplied by British Rail seems to be working during COVID, so why cancel this very, very much needed service? The District Council, the local South Holland media and the general public are all in favour of these new services. It would help South Holland residents to get to Lincoln Hospital, it would help our students to get to uni, and it would help people working in Lincoln to use the new services, which takes cars off our busy road. Can I request, Steve, that this is looked at by your company and put back on the programme ASAP? Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Rodney. Max, do you want to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Councillor. So I will certainly feed that back in through the process that's been set up. In particular, the services in Lincolnshire with the COVID reductions have been particularly more affected than some of our other services across Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. If only because of the relative proximity of Lincoln train crew depot, which is where the services run from, to our other train crew depots, and the lack of easy cross cover that gives. But nonetheless, I will feed your concerns back in to our recovery task force. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Any other members wishing to come in, Steve?
No, we are look to be clear this time. No hands and no speaks.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Max. Please feel free to stay with us if you wish, or move on if you need to. And thank you to Laura as well. Jane, if I may, Paul McEwen, is he the next?
Good morning. Morning, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Okay, firstly, thanks for the opportunity to join the committee. Apologies, I had dialed in on my laptop that's had an IT gremlin, so I'm just ringing in through my phone, so apologies for that. I was going to cover in the time that I have available 3 areas. You would be no surprise, I'll just touch on COVID-19 and network rails. Management of that. I'll talk a little bit around further most recent devolution of Network Rail closer to the passengers and local stakeholders like yourselves, and I'll touch on the enhancements programmes, but I'll leave the Swindon Midline speed because that's the subsequent agenda item. So firstly, just to quickly introduce myself, Paul McGill, the Investment Director for the Eastern Region. I have been at the committee on a number of previous occasions. My role has slightly changed and expanded since I was last in attendance, as the devolution agenda for Network Rail created the Eastern Region, which took the old LNE's East Midlands route and combined it with the Anglia route into a single region. But beneath that, there are 4 routes, of which Lincolnshire sits within the East Midlands route within Network Rail, closely aligned with East Midlands trains service of operations. COVID, I'll split our response to COVID into 2 areas. Firstly, like majority of the passenger and freight operators, the majority of our workforce has continued to be in work throughout the COVID crisis from earlier this year in March. Approximately, I don't have the exact number, but over 80% of our workforce will have continued to operate and maintain the railway services in conjunction with the train operators. A number of those areas have obviously had to go through quite challenging assessments of social distancing and compliance, whether that's in our maintenance operations and vans, all the way through to our control and signalling centres to ensure our workforce are as safe as possible. Second area was our capital investment. Initially, all our sites were shut down whilst assessments were taken around how could the construction activities be replanned, sequenced, so that we could again comply with social distancing guidelines, rules, and bring sites back on. And I'm delighted to say that it was only generally 4 to 6 weeks in March and April when we had our sites non-operational, and post that date all were back constructing, whether that was our renewals or an enhancement schemes, albeit there was some impact on reduced productivity due to compliance with social distancing. But we are progressing fairly well at this time. Clearly, we'll continue to assess the potential impact of second wave, not dissimilar to EMR, on our absentees, on our signalling and maintenance staff specifically. Second item was devolution. So Network Rail has been going through what has been a headline brand of putting passengers first, on devolving the majority of our activities and controls that were on a national basis into the regions, and more importantly into the routes as far as possible, as close as possible to passengers and stakeholders. We completed the final phase of that on the 12th of October, which was the phase 3. So all 4 routes, as I made reference to, East Midlands, East Coast, the North and East and Anglia routes within Eastern are all live. What are the big changes? The big changes is that the asset management of the infrastructure has been devolved with resources and accountability into those routes, as well as the funding, the 5-year renewal funding of the assets is now held and accountable by the route director along with his management and executive teams. In my own area, the investment directorate has expanded, so the regional strategic planning teams that were previously, whilst located in the geography, were actually reported directly into our headquarters, into our national system operator. That was also devolved on the 12th of October. So in many ways, enhancements to the infrastructure is now a sort of a full cycle, cradle to grave activity for the routes and region. Thirdly, the larger enhancements portfolio, probably the most relevant across the Eastern region, is the East Coast programme. So the King's Cross project is one of our single largest project that is in delivery mode at this time. It was, again, stood down for 4 to 6 weeks at the early phase of COVID. That had actually a much longer consequence to it because there is very critical path items that were impacted by that, as well as wider industry decisions around, made the reference, EMR made reference to driver availability, training. That is a key issue for majority, if not all, of my projects where we are making changes. We have to train suitably the drivers and crews. So that was a national sort of constraint, along with the ability of the industry to manage so many timetable changes. It initially was going to be deferred by 12 months to the main partial closure of King's Cross in December of 21, but I think with good challenge and good industry working, that has been accelerated back to February of next year. So in about 4 to 5 months' time, we will be closing for the final phase, which is the most disruptive, but also at the moment with passenger volumes felt the most appropriate. We will be closing 50% of the capacity of King's Cross. Similar, closer to home, is the fairly significant infrastructure project at Warrington, just north of Peterborough, for the dive under onto the GN lines. Progressing has had its own challenges around weather. We figured out the weather before COVID and storms that hit the project, but reprogramming is scheduled. Its main activity will be to shift a substantial concrete structure under the East Coast Main Line, and that is scheduled for partial closures in January of next year, and then progressing for conclusion through next year. At that point, I was going to stop and see if there's any questions.
Are there any questions in the chat box, please, Steve?
Yes, Councillor Bruce would like to speak.
Councillor Bruce, Chris, please.
I don't hold it all. Thank you very much for that. And I believe that what's happening at Warrington is extremely good news. And I'd welcome your. I can remember the actual works done at Offord to iron the curves out many years ago. And I would, if I were you, stand on the bridge at Newark, look at all that water down there, and say we won't touch it with a barge pole. My real question is, when the East Coast Main Line was electrified, I remember looking and thinking how clever it was that all the stanchions and the supports were further apart than they were on the West Coast, and assuming it was modern technology. I gather it was a money-saving exercise. Is it right that some of the electrification, the electric infrastructure on the East Coast Main Line is reaching the end of its life rather earlier than was expected? That's my main question.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I don't think the infrastructure is reaching the end of its life any faster than was anticipated in the 70s, 80s. Obviously, it has had a 40-year sort of life cycle so far. It is already under a programme of renewals, so it wouldn't be an enhancement, but the actual physical infrastructure, predominantly the wires, not the stanchions, have an ongoing programme of renewing them. In parallel, though, to that, we have, through funding from the department, making significant investment in upgrading the power supply that the overhead wires can make available for operators, because one of the big changes in the fleet and operations is a significant increase in electric fleets that utilise the East Coast. So we are nearing completion of what we call PSU, Power Supply Upgrade 1, which is up to broadly Doncaster from King's Cross, and most recently just secured just short of 400 million to upgrade the power north of York to the Scottish border. So that's an ongoing enhancements programme.
Just briefly, briefly saying too that I can remember, a number of members will remember 9 years ago when the GNG line was being updated. What a shame it wasn't they weren't allowing the space for electrification. Well, of course, the space has been allowed for it, so we haven't lost sight of it. And we think there are many ways of improving connectivity and capacity in the eastern part of our country. Thank you very much.
I agree.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Paul. Does that complete your presentation, Paul?
Yes. Unless there's any other questions?
We have no further questions, thank you. Just, Mr Chairman, Councillor Whittington's about to leave the meeting as he has another meeting elsewhere.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul, for that update. Could I now ask Mr Clark, Andrew Clark, please, Midlands Connect?
Hiya. Thanks very much for the invite to today's session. I just wanted to provide a quick update on the Newark to Lincoln line speed work that Midlands Connect has now been looking at. Hopefully you're aware, but Midlands Connect, as the subnational transport body, put together a strategy in 2017, which really outlined a set of aspirations for speeds and journey times and frequencies across the network. These are aspirations for the level of service that we'd like to see in the future on various routes. And specifically for Nottingham to Lincoln, our strategy identifies an aspiration for faster rail journeys and also more frequent rail journeys. So at the moment, I'm sure you're well aware, the average speed on the corridor is relatively low. So a journey time of basically an hour really between Nottingham and Lincoln. And in regard to frequency, currently an hourly through service, we identified an aspiration for that to be increased to 2 trains per hour. So what we try and do in Midlands Connect is we do a feasibility study to work out the economics of making these sorts of changes, and then we start on the business case process, subject to there being obviously a credible case for doing so. So back in 2019, we completed a feasibility study for this corridor. In regard to frequency, we actually found that it would be quite difficult in economic terms to justify a higher frequency in the short term, but actually in the medium and long term, there is a much stronger case. In regard to journey time, we found that actually there's a very credible case for seeking a higher line speed between Nottingham and Lincoln. So given the findings of that piece of work, we've now been working with colleagues at Network Rail to develop a business case for a line speed increase. I should add that in parallel with us looking at the feasibility of these different things, Network Rail have been working on a renewal scheme between Newark and Lincoln. Effectively, this would have upgraded the signalling on the corridor, but it wouldn't have allowed for faster running of trains. So the view in the room, certainly between ourselves and Network Rail, was that that might be a wasted opportunity. So what we're now seeking to do is, rather than then put back in like for like speed, we actually seek a 75 mile per hour line speed on the corridor. At the moment, it's a mixture of 50 miles per hour and 70 miles per hour. So rising to 75, certainly for the bits that are 50, is quite a considerable uplift. So in terms of where we've got to, we've certainly done a first cut of the economics, and this is certainly giving us a BCR that's in excess of 1. That's the benefit cost ratio, and that's the measure that will be used by the Department for Transport when they decide whether to award funding for the corridor. We're hoping that actually that number will rise further once we get further certainty on some of the capital costs that are required. We've still got some pieces of work to do to get the business case over the line. So, for example, we've quantified what's called the transport benefits, so i.e. the journey time saving that is accrued by each passenger. We also need to look at things like wider economic benefits. So when we shorten the journey time, we can legitimately claim that actually there's more economic interaction on the corridor. So we'll be trying to quantify those impacts in our business case. We also need to do a piece of work called benefits realisation. And what this really means is that we can obviously talk about saving a handful of minutes on a theoretical level, but we actually need to work with the likes of Max at East Midlands Railway to confirm that actually the operator could make use of those faster speeds on the corridor. Early indications are that the operator should be able to use those savings to create a better timetable, but we obviously need to go through the real nitty-gritty of that process. Just to say, whilst Midlands Connect has been leading on the business case with Network Rail, we've had really good input from the local authorities on the corridor. So given that this stretches from Nottingham to Lincoln, we've had good input from Nottingham City Council, Nottinghamshire County Council, and also Lincolnshire County Council with Jane and team. So that's the Newark to Lincoln section. We're also just starting a process to look at the Nottingham to Newark part of the corridor. So you might recall that the signalling for that section is already permits 75 miles per hour. We're now looking at what other infrastructure might be needed on that corridor so that you could effectively have a 75 mile per hour or 90 mile per hour line speed between Nottingham and Newark. We're at very early stage on that section of route, but we've got some initial agreement with Network Rail about a way that we'll look at that. We'll do what's called a GRIP 1 study, which is really an early look at the constraints on the corridor. Subject to there not being any nasties when we do that feasibility study, we then hope to continue towards a business case, so it will effectively follow the same process as the Newark to Lincoln section. So that's my update at this stage. Hopefully it'll be viewed as a positive step. We're quite confident that we've got a robust case here for a line speed increase, and it's been great to work with our partners to see the project this far. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Steve, any member wishing to comment or ask a question?
Yes, Councillor Chris Brewis.
Thank you, Steve. Chris?
I think once again, thank you very much for that. And I think the idea of increasing the speed from 50 to 75 is a very good aim to have in mind. And I think as well that you have to be really effective. We also have to think, we're talking about joined up thinking of improving the service beyond, in other words, going north and east of Lincoln. Although we're about to have the eastern bypass, we don't want it bunged up too much with people using the entire length of the A46, which runs from Cleethorpes to Bath. We'd rather they actually use trains. But strength to your arms, and I think I, for one, when I'm going to rail meetings, occasionally do Ely to Liverpool, and the thought that I might have to change in Nottingham will be a bit of a change of life for me. Anyway, but thank you very much, and strength to your arm, but look a bit further afield as well, because the entire benefit comes from joined up thinking, as we already heard today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Chris. Andrew, any comment you might wish to add?
I mean, just to say that in terms of the business case process, we can only legitimately claim travel time for the trains that already serve the corridor. So that's the sort of business case process. But I definitely agree with the point that we need to consider the wider corridor, and very happy to continue doing that with the likes of Jane and also colleagues at Nottingham and Nottinghamshire.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Any other member wishing to make a contribution, Steve?
No, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So the Scrutiny Committee has been invited to discuss the progress on rail-related issues with representatives and to consider the recovery and role of rail in Lincolnshire going forward. Does any member wish to have a debate or make any further contribution to this? Yes, Chris?
It's just a very brief one to say I think we ought to have, especially in the current crisis, fairly regular updates that we know how things are progressing. And I would encourage us, as we have recently and have for some time, to make a consistent message about it all, and to ensure that we are noted and listened to. And I think the fact that they've said there's a consistent message coming from Nottingham, Nottinghamshire, Lincoln, that's a start of good news where everybody in the region is pulling together to try and improve things. But I think we need regular updates, Chairman, just to remind you.
Thank you for that, Chris. Are you suggesting more than an annual update, Chris? 6 months, 3 months?
We don't want to so bog them down that reporting to us affects the programme, but I think we need to know where we are at least every 6 months with the deepest respect, so that we know how things are moving forward, especially in this rather strange situation we're in at the moment. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Chris. Jason or Jane or any other guests with us today? Any response to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I would just say we are in the process of developing the new Local Transport Plan 5. Clearly, rail is going to be a significant component within that Local Transport Plan, and we will be taking account of that very much that joined up for thinking that I think Councillor Brewis has made a point about today, as have others. And we are looking at commissioning a couple of additional rail studies, one looking at maximising the sort of service improvements, but then also looking at what further infrastructure improvements might be needed a little down the line. I mean, we may be talking sort of 5-10 years away, but that is a piece of work that we're about to start commissioning.
Thank you, Jason. Are you happy with that, Chris? How do you feel about a sort of interim 6 month come back to us, Jason? Is that possible, or is that?
I mean, we can certainly ask our colleagues in the rail industry. I mean, as Councillor Bruce knows, it's been a very difficult time for them, and we wouldn't want to get in the way of them, putting in place the improvements that we want to do. But I'm sure they'd be more than happy to come along on a 6 month basis. We may not be able to get everybody every time, but I think we can probably get at least some representation from the rail industry on a 6 month basis.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Jason.
We fully understand that, Chairman, and I find it very useful to be kept regularly informed and up to date about what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for that, Jason. Thank you for that, Jane. Daniel, there's no other contributors, I think, in the chat box. Is that right, Steve?
That is correct. Yes, no more.
Okay, so there's 2 or 3 things to capture there, I think, Daniel. One is the last point that Councillor Bruce had just made. There's the earlier point from Councillor Grocott with regard to South Holland. They are the only two that I've got a note of. Daniel, have you picked up any others?
No, Chairman. Yes, I've picked up the past Councillor Grocott and South Holland. And we've already been in communication with officers about that. And I will speak to Jason and Jane about potentially a update in 6 months, probably just maybe an officer update, and then leave the additional partners for the annual update. But yeah, definitely, as Councillor Brewer said, plenty of information.
Thank you, Daniel. Are members content with that, please?
Yeah.
Can't. Okay, that's fine. Can't hear any dissent. So that can I propose then that the committee receive the report and highlight the points made during the debate to partners and officers? The points being those that we've referred to. Any dissenters, please?
Happily second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll take it with nothing in the chat boxes, Steve, in terms of dissent.
Nothing at all, no.
Okay, I'll take that as unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Can I thank all our partners for their time and the reports today, and we look forward to meeting you and hearing from you again in the future. Thank you very much indeed. I think
thank you.
This might be an appropriate point for me to pass the chair over to the Vice Chairman, Councillor Rowe. But before I do, as members will be aware, Daniel Steele, our Democratic officer, this is his last meeting before he goes on to pastures new. Personally, may I thank you, Daniel, for all the support and help that you've given to me personally, and I'm sure Councillor Rowe and other members of the committee will echo their personal thanks at some appropriate time. But a sincere thank you, Daniel, and I wish you well in your future endeavours.
Thank you, Chairman.
Can I join that, Chairman, and wish Daniel very good luck in writing some more novels, and wish him very good fortune.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. I'm sure other members before the meeting ends will make their appropriate comments as well. So I'll say goodbye to you all for now. Leave you in to the tender mercies of the Vice Chairman, Councillor Rowe. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob. Right, so we move on to item 5, which is the cycling strategy. This item is an introduction to the cycling strategy being developed by the County Council and provides an overview of the emerging cycling and walking network plans and other activities relating to cycling and walking. As part of this item, I'd like to welcome Andy Porter from Minsterfields Community Group in Lincoln to the meeting as a member of the public. We are always keen to hear from members of the public, and Mr. Porter contacted us about attending the committee to express the local community view for a footbridge over the A158 Lincoln bypass near the Netlham roundabout junction with the A46 and the B1182. Mr. Andy Porter, are you with us? Are you able to speak? We can give you 3 minutes.
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and we're more than happy for you to start now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm grateful to the chairman for allowing me to speak, and to all committee members for listening to me. I will happily answer any questions, and if anyone would like to meet me at the junction to view it, please use the contact details in my letter. The junction is about 2 miles north of the centre of Lincoln. It is a roundabout where the main road from the city, north towards Grimsby, crosses the east-west route of the Lincoln bypass. The landscape south of the roundabout is suburban, north is open countryside. Beside the road north of the roundabout is a footpath cum cycleway, passing the few houses at Danby Hill, then going on to Netlham, about 1 mile from the roundabout, and beyond to Dunholm and Welton. It is part of the National Cycle Route 1 between Dover and the Scottish Highlands on the network of the sustainable transport charity Sustrans. It links with other footpaths and bridleways. Minsterfields is a new housing development to the southeast of the roundabout. Our community group was formally constituted last year to address concerns raised by residents through our Facebook group. One resident recently asked us to press for a safe road crossing at the junction. We asked our members for their views, Those views were summarised in our letter to the Council that you have seen. People of all ages and fitness levels want to cross the bypass. We have walkers, cyclists, joggers and serious runners, parents with children, people with restricted mobility. Our letter explains their varied reasons for wanting to cross. One recurring theme is that Ofsted reports make Nettlam's schools particularly attractive to parents of children aged 2 to 11. About half of the pupils travel from outside the village, so there are already problems at school run times with congestion and parking. It will be good to persuade more parents from the south of the bypass to cycle to school with their children. For pupils aged 11 to 18, the William Farr School in Welton is also within cycling distance. It is not just people from Minster Fields who use the crossing. We're just a relatively small part of a large area from the bypass to the centre of Lincoln, whose residents want to cross in the same way that we do. People in the villages north of the bypass also want to come south to Lincoln for work, shopping and so on. Many more potential users will also be attracted in future by the new houses being built in Roman Gate on the southwest of the roundabout, as well as by the ongoing growth of Minster Fields. The problems with the present crossing reported by our members are detailed in our letter. It is dangerous, there is a high risk of accidents, some residents are afraid to cross at all. They're deterred from using the sustainable transport that they want to use. The bypass is a barrier to such use. For the well-being of individuals and of the planet, it is better to walk or to cycle than to drive. The issues of sustainable transport and safety are inextricably linked. There is no point in the Council providing footpaths and cycleways that are so dangerous that people are deterred from using them. But that is exactly what is happening at this junction. Safe access to the footpath and cycleway is essential. We understand that the crossing has already been reviewed by the Council, which decided last year that plans for a footbridge should be developed. Yet we still don't have a bridge, and the hazards, for two reasons, are getting worse. First, traffic volumes will increase significantly when the Eastern Bypass opens later this year. Secondly, work was scheduled for this year at this roundabout and at the next one at Riseholme to improve traffic flows and speeds. Work on our roundabout has, however, been delayed. When it is completed, pedestrians and cyclists will have to cross 6 lanes rather than the present 4. In conclusion, I would stress that the Council's own research has demonstrated that there is an existing need for a footbridge. Residents are keen to use sustainable transport at the location, but some are already deterred from doing so by the present crossing. The hazards will increase with more traffic, faster traffic and more lanes, simultaneously with an increase in the number of residents living in the immediate area. The deterrent effect will only be increased. If nothing is done, there will be accidents and the existing growing demand to use sustainable transport will not be met. We would therefore ask that a footbridge should be incorporated into the new plans and built as soon as possible. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Andy. Your letter that you wrote to Councillor Davies, Councillor Hill and to Andy Gutherson has been passed around all the committee members. I'm quite happy if any of the committee members want to ask any questions. I'll just give you a minute to go into chat if anybody wants to.
Chair.
Yes, Councillor Renshaw.
Yeah. According to the notice, I've left the meeting. Well, I certainly not left the meeting. So
we can see that.
Yeah. And it just says it says you've left the meeting. Anyhow, just on the point, Mr. Porter's point. I mean, I'm fully supportive of this, as was Councillor Brothway, because it's obvious to me, having previously lived in Nettlam, that it's unsafe to cross that particular point there because of the traffic. But it's certainly, I'm very supportive of what Mr. Porter said, and I'm hoping that we can include somewhere an MU bridge over that particular junction to make the Lincoln area more cohesive and benefit all road users. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Renshaw. I've no more notifications that anybody wants to speak. So, Andy, thank you very much for attending the meeting. It's always a pleasure when we get some outside involvement. So we move on. I would now like to welcome Philip Watt, the project officer, who will present the report as a committee. I just want to highlight the actions before we move on. The Scrutiny Committee is invited to consider and comment on any aspects of the report and strategy, and to highlight any recommendations or further actions for consideration. If councillors would like to input on this item, please type speak into the chat function, and I will take questions at the end of the item. So over to you, Philip, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. With your permission, could I take control of the screen so I can share my presentation with you?
Yes, you can.
Thank you very much. Bear with me for a second and we will see if I can sort this out. Can I just confirm that can be seen?
All we can see is your photo, or all I can see is your photo.
Okay. Let me try once more, and if not, what I could do is just talk through the presentation that I believe has been sent through to you all anyway today. Is that visible to you all?
Yes,
now?
we now have it.
Okay, I appreciate this isn't in slideshow mode, but I think just for the sake of time, and so you don't all have to observe me messing around with it, if we work through like this, that may be the best thing. So thank you again, Chair. My name is Phil Watt. I'm the TSG Projects Officer, and I'm here today really to talk through two issues with you. The first is the development of our cycling strategy, which has been included as a draft for you to see, and then is to discuss our work so far on our cycling and walking network plans. And actually, Mr. Porter's contribution before that, I think, has actually set the scene quite well for the work that we are looking to do, and hopefully there will be some information within here for members that shows the work that we are doing. So to start with the strategy, what we are attempting to do is to create a fairly short and punchy overall statement of goals and intent on the part of Lincolnshire County Council. What I would point out right at the start here is that this is a cycling specific document. It's not cycling and walking. Our view has been to date that walking is a distinctive mode by itself and deserves at least equal treatment to the work that we are doing on cycling. And following the feedback we received today, our intention would be to take a separate piece of work focusing on walking forward. Just to break down some of the abbreviations in there for you, the LTS would be the local transport strategies that we've been working on, and the CWMP is the cycling and walking network plans, more of which later. So that's what we're trying to do, as you can see on your screen there. Just a bit of logistical stuff around the strategy itself. We are intending to keep very similar, identical in fact, branding and design that we've seen on the transport strategy documents to date to give us that consistency. So we have that family of document approaches, and so that people can see the joined up working that is going on there. This work is very interlinked with the transport strategy work taking place today, and is helping to inform and to be informed by that. As I said, it is designed to be a short and punchy document, but also to be accessible. So going throughout the draft, as you'll see, we have several infographics which are designed to sort of bring some of the benefits of cycling to life. Here's some examples from there. The infographics you'll see in the document that is in draft, they are illustrative only, so please don't think they are the final ones. That's just to give you an example of what we are looking at. As with every good strategy, we need to have a vision, and this is the draft vision that we have come up with so far. Just a few points I would take really from that is the vision about making Lincolnshire one of the best rural counties for cycling in the UK. we're not trying to replicate here what is being taken place in London or Manchester, because we are not those places. We have to come up with a very bespoke solution for the needs of the residents here and the specific transport needs that we have. So we are very much not trying to ape what has taken place elsewhere. So that's the goal of the rural side, but also you'll see at the bottom, making cycling the natural and accessible choice for shorter utility trips for all abilities and ages. Accessible, I think, is the key word there. This is about making cycling a normal activity and just a regular mode of transport that all of our residents feel is something they can take part in. So moving into the details of the strategy itself, these are the contents: a foreword, an introduction, and then we've broken it down into 5 themes with 5 objectives within each theme, of which I'll walk through each one of those in just a second, and then finally a conclusion to wrap everything up. So looking at that first theme, this is our very infrastructure heavy side. What I would stress here is that actually, as an authority on our draft work, we're very much ahead of the curve on this. The very recently issued Local Transport Note 120 and the gear change document, which is the Department for Transport's national cycling strategy, has now actually put both of those first 2 points as key things that they are looking for local authorities to do. I would like to say that they probably stole those ideas from us, but I don't think that would be fair. So the first two points there are really about making sure that we design the infrastructure appropriately, that we don't see the barriers which we've just heard about and so on. But also the second two points is about that crossover working, making sure we work effectively with all of the partners that we have and all of the expertise that we have to maximise the input and expertise that we've got. Final point there, which I'll be talking about later on today, is about the development and review of cycling and walking network plans for every local transport strategy area. I won't go into too much depth about that right now, as I've got a separate section of the presentation on that. But what I would just point is that this is the only section of the 5 that's focusing exclusively on highways design. So designed to be a statement of intent as such there, in terms of the County Council viewing cycling holistically, as we see as we move on to the second point here, which is cycling for health. So not just the health of the residents, but also of the planet at large. So how can we advocate for cycling as a public health piece of work, but also how it can be used to reduce CO2 and meet some of those aspirations that we have under the green agenda. You'll see as point 3 there that we wish to continue our support of the cycle training scheme around the county. While that doesn't necessarily, I can understand why a question might be asked why this features at this stage. This is about making sure we embed cycling as a mode of transport at the earliest possible point in children's lives, so they can regard cycling as a natural choice for them. So as you can see here, these are the 5 key points that we have for environmental and human health. Moving on, and I think this is an important point, is building a brand, really, Cycle Lincolnshire, and developing our leisure and tourism offer for cycling. I would draw attention specifically at this point to the second bullet point here, and about the building of this Cycle Lincolnshire brand. Last summer, we worked on a successful project with Visit Lincoln on marketing a Cycle England cycle tourism package to the Western European trade, to the Western European tourism trade, and this had actually proved very successful with the Dutch arm of TUI actually taking the plans on and wanting to take them forward. Unfortunately, as we all know, this year, excuse me, these circumstances have changed somewhat, meaning we've not maybe seen the level of tourism that we would like. But Lincolnshire has been cited on several occasions as a largely an untapped resource. We've seen the success that activities such as the Tour de Yorkshire have brought for cycling north of the Humber. This is definitely something that we feel that we can build on here. And again, you'll see some important things locally as well about developing consistent signage and wayfinding. That's essential not just for people from outside of the county, but also for those inside as well. The fourth point of the 5 is cycling for our economy, and how can we use cycling to enhance that sense of place that I think we've been working towards across multiple teams, and also how we engage with our businesses and industry to maximise employee cycling. The one point I think I would pull out here is point 4, which is it's often overlooked on cycling plans, but it's to make sure that we do consider cycle parking as part of that wider network work to ensure that people have an end-to-end experience there, in terms of if we build a network, if we build an infrastructure network that works, but there is nowhere to park your bike at the end of it, then we cannot encourage people to visit our town and city centres to stop, to shop, to dwell, and to spend their time there via bike. But again, you'll see that working collaboratively across the board to access those non-highways funding streams, such as the Future High Streets Fund. And the final point here, which is, again, can often be overlooked, is how we improve our intelligence as an authority on how cycling takes place. Gathering the data that we need is not only useful for us in terms of being able to plan the engineering interventions that we want to do effectively, but also to be able to bid for funding as it comes out. We're seeing increasingly from the Department for Transport that they are expecting ever quicker turnarounds on bid times. We need accurate and reliable data that we can instantly access, that will enable us to be able to submit the best possible bids that we can, but also so we know how cycling is taking place around our county. Just to finish the strategy side, then there will be a conclusion, which will be a closing statement and drawing those themes together. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take questions on the strategy at this point before I move on to talk about the cycling and walking network plans, if that would be appropriate.
Yes, thank you, Phil. I've got 2 councillors wish to speak. Councillor Jackie Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. Oh, sorry, I don't know what's going on there. Chairman?
Councillor Jackie Brockway is now exiting.
We can hear you now.
You can hear me? Okay, thank you, Chairman. Sorry.
No, we've lost you again, or I've lost you again.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on.
I've got you now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll stay put. I won't move. Yes, my questions are about the stuff raised by Mr. Porter, actually, and unfortunately the system chucked me out then, and I have further systems about the questions about the network. Am I still able to mention Mr. Porter's stuff? Oh.
Yes, happy for you to do so.
Thank you. Well, I think it's important for the committee to know that the Minster Fields residents, even though they're on the Lincoln side of the roundabout, they are actually part of West Lindsey, and they do gravitate naturally towards Nettleham. The children go to school there, they shop there, they take part in the events there. So this business about the footbridge or some safe method of getting across is in fact of high importance, and I've received a lot of letters about it recently, because I understand there has been a near miss with a mother and 2 children. They can't, you know, if we're doing cycling and walking, they need to be able to do so safely. So I want to back very much what Mr. Porter said, and I'd like to thank him for coming. With regard to my other questions, they are to do more with the next section. So with your permission, I'll wait, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Brockway. Councillor Chris Brewis, do you wish to ask a question about the so far?
it was a brief observation more than anything, saying this is very dear to, I know, my heart, and also Councillor Peter Copeland, because National Cycle Route 1 goes through our patches. But the one thing I'd really like to commend you on is the fact that we're going to have consistent messaging, because this will only work if we have consistent message, both past and future, so that everybody knows what we're looking at and talking about. And I would encourage that very strongly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Phil, so do you want to, yes, if nobody else wants to speak, so if you want to carry on, please.
Indeed, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so the second part of my presentation today was really to talk you through the local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, or the LCWIP for the snappy name that they have. Locally, we tend to refer to these as a cycling and walking network plan. But just to provide some background to this, the LCWIP process is a Department for Transport approved process for us to gather an evidence base of what we want our cycling and walking network to look like. Now, the approach that we've taken with this is to have one of these plans for every transport strategy area around the county, and we'll be doing some supplementary work as well for some of those smaller towns such as Louth and Horncastle and Bourne, to make sure that we capture as many of those places as we can. I should stress this doesn't come with any finance directly attached to it, but rather, as is the title of my presentation here, it is a basis for investment. Increasingly, what the DFT are asking from us is, when we put a bid in for a sustainable travel piece of work, is this evidenced through an LCWIP? In the Emergency Active Travel Fund bidding that's recently been put out by the DFT, that was a question that was asked, and those authorities that have not developed these plans are likely to fare much worse when it comes to securing finance from the DFT. So what I wanted was just to talk you through the process itself, so you have an understanding of that, because this is really where we put the meat on the bones of what we want our network to look like. So we start very much with a remote exercise in terms of gathering as much evidence as we can. So we're looking at road traffic incidents, the propensity to cycle tool, the National Travel Survey, and so on, so we can build up a picture of what the network looks like. Increasingly, as we try to capture modern data that's available, we can see things like this. Now, this is a heat map that shows us where cycling takes place. So on this one in Lincoln, we can see the brighter the light, the more it is used, and conversely, the darker, the less it is used. Now, while this is useful for us to see where cycling is taking place, it's also useful for us to see where cycling is not taking place. So I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but this area here is Millman Road that goes down the side of Monk's Abbey Primary School. We've already spoken about National Cycle Network Route 1. That is NCN1. That is the route of it there. Yet we can see that people are choosing to take other routes rather than use that. Now, a sense check will tell us that obviously there's a great big hill there, but also the crossing of Monk's Road at the bottom is not a great experience on a bike, especially if you're going down that steep hill, and that's why people are probably choosing to not do that. So we start by gathering all of the evidence that we can. We then take this further on to an internal workshop of officers from across the authority to share their expertise on where we might see areas of growth that we need to consider. So we see the Western Growth Corridor here. Now, this looks like a spider's web in terms of how we arrive at things, but we're really saying from a central point in each super output area, where are people going to and from? And so we map that during this internal workshop, and that provides you with the spider's web that you see at this point, which gives us that bird's eye as the crow flies. Where do people want to go? Taking that forward a bit more, we then obviously have to transpose that onto the road network as it is, because that is where the routes are going to be by and large. And we end up with a map similar to this. So this is the basics of the wider network, and this is for the Lincoln Transport Strategy Area Network Plan, and taking into account the points which have been made so far by Mr. Porter and Councillor Brockway. You can see we have that route heading up here, Route 1, which has been identified internally as an officer priority to take us out towards Netleham and onwards towards Welton. So this is taking that spider's web and transposing it onto the highway network, but also providing what we think are the most important routes to take into account. The next step from that is to move forward and to actually get out onto the ground and to do some route audits and to see what interventions we feel need to take place at each stage along those routes. Following doing that, these maps are then taken to probably the most important part of the entire stage, which is a community engagement session where we invite the public, businesses, cycle groups, any stakeholder really to come in and feed back on the plans that we've put out to date, the routes that we are suggesting, and the interventions that we suggest, and for the actual users to be able to give us that sense check that we need, that this is the right thing for them. Once that is completed, it then gets turned in effect into there's a bigger document than this, but in effect we get a map that shows us what the network should be like. This is what we are proposing. There's still a final few bits to be done here, but this is what the proposal for the Greater Lincoln Area Cycling Network would look like. There is a walking element to this as well, but that will be addressed at a separate point when we bring the walking work forward. Zooming in further, this is the Lincoln Urban Area Network as we would expect to see it. And zooming in again to the city centre, this shows how in-depth we can get. Now, as I said, it's not just about the drawing of a map and that's it. As you'll see from your packs, we do identify key interventions. And the final slide to show you really is this slide. So this will provide us with short-term and longer-term interventions at key points. What do we need to do to make that network usable and to break down some of the obstacles that have already been outlined today, so they can be some quicker wins, as you'll see on the short-term side, can range from very low cost up to those much more expensive but much more hard hitting and high impact interventions as a longer term thing. So hopefully that provides us with whatever sort of funding bidding whatever scale of funding comes forward, we have got a plan, we have got an evidence-based network that we can take off the shelf and bid for something that we know people would want to see. So, Mr. Chairman, that's it in terms of a presentation from me. I'll stop sharing my screen now, so hopefully we're back there. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Phil. Again, I've got Councillor Brockway would like to come back in, please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think it's very exciting that we've got this scheme, and I think there's a very great deal of very good stuff. However, there are a few problems in Saxby, and Saxby Parish Council has asked me to raise them. If I could take you to page 15, please. At the top of the page, it talks about the Access Lincoln project, and it says the project is also funding a capital scheme to create a link from North to South Icombe and completion of a short section of cycleway between Lincoln and Saxby. Now, I have contacted senior officers about this, and the problems are underway, being sorted. However, Saxby is very unhappy because, in fact, this is inaccurate. They actually closed the scheme against Saxby, didn't tell them. Saxby has been trying to get answers to their emails for many, many months, hasn't received answers at all. I, in fact, sent an email in September and got no reply as well. And it seems that various costs and things changed, so one understands that. And I understand that the hiking scheme has gone very well and is being done well. However, Saxelby has put in infrastructure around this. They've announced this to the public. They've pursued the idea of Boris bikes and various other things, only to be told in an email, once they asked again, please answer our emails, to be told they're shut out. So I actually contacted senior officers who, to their credit, responded absolutely immediately, said, yes, there is a problem. They will find the money to fund this, even though it means breaking the budget. But so I, very impressive response, I have to say. And but now Saxelby has had another email which suggests that emails that were exchanged at the very start of the project haven't been acted on with regard to the land. Now, to be fair, I do understand that because of COVID, there have been excessive workload issues in this department. So this isn't about hating anybody or bashing anybody or anything like that. But Saxelby has asked me to raise 3 points with you, and they want them recorded, please, Chairman. One is that our concerns, this is their wording, our concerns are formally minuted. The second is we request documented assurances from LCC that they are committed to ensuring the successful delivery of the project, which is timelines for the delivery. And finally, that the Scrutiny Committee revisit the progress of the project on a regular basis. Now, what's done is done, and things do go wrong, and there's no hating you or anything like that. But and the response has been that we're going to go ahead, we're going to sort it. But Saxelby is pretty bruised, actually, over this to find out what they found out via very late emails. So what I'd like, please, is assurance from Phil that he's on board with this, that we understand the problems he's had, and that he's on board with this, and that they will now make regular, timely email contact and carry out the promises that they've made to assure that this scheme goes ahead. So that's the Saxelby thing. And I want to thank you for listening to that. It's all very hard to say something like that, but I want to praise Saxelby for the way they've responded and their professional response in what is a difficult situation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Philip, do you feel in a position to respond to any of that?
Yes, I certainly can. I do appreciate completely what's been said there. It was a human error on my part, and all I can do is apologise for that again, and I do mean that. The completion of that section of route would provide an incredible link, which is a very feasible piece of work to link the A50, it's the A57, isn't it, to the walkway in Saxelby. I jumped the gun slightly on the provision of funding there and how we would take that forward. And what I will say is that I will make regular and timely updates as requested to the parish.
Jackie,
Chairman, may I come back? That is a really good and honourable response. I really respect you for that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. I will just make a personal point from my side. As Phil knows, I've been heavily involved in the South Highcombe project, which I'm really pleased to say is being worked on now. It's working well, and thank Philip for his help with that and for his response to Saxelby, and I'm sure things will get sorted out accordingly with that. So, sorry, I've lost my point, my mark here. Does anybody else have any other comments to make on the report so far? I would just say that I think, yes, we would like this to come back at a later date when more things have moved on. Is there any other comments? I'll just give everybody a second or two. No. Daniel, before I make the proposal, is there anything that you feel we should just put into the proposal other than a further review?
No, Chairman, I think reviewing on a regular basis was mentioned, and we'll make sure that the concerns, as Councillor Brockway highlighted, are minuted in the minutes. As discussed. So, I think just the return of the item.
Thank you, Daniel. So I propose that the committee receive the report and endorse the work being undertaken on cycling and walking, and request that we get regular reviews and updates on what is happening. Does anyone dissent? If so, could they put something in chat? That's nobody responding, so that's great. As nobody is dissenting, then we can close that item and move on. Thank you very much, Philip.
Thank you.
Right. Item 7 is the review of Highways customer engagement and liaison arrangements. I'd like to welcome Karen, the Assistant Director Highways, who will present the report to the committee on a review of the Highways customer engagement arrangements with the committee review towards the end of 2019. Once again, put your speak into the chat if you wish to speak. And Karen, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'm going to propose to do is to go through the report just quickly with you, and then you can see our progress to date. Can everybody see that okay? I'll take silence as yes.
It looks good to me.
Okay, thank you. So as you know, in October 2019, I came to this committee meeting and I shared with you the Highways Customer Engagement and Liaison Strategy document. That was to say to our councillors and our residents and all our customers the level of service that they can expect from ourselves, and also to highlight the improvements that we intended to make to the service. What I would like to say at this point, when I go through the appendices to say what we have done to date, that in highways, I don't like us to ever sit on our laurels. This is work in progress, it's continuous improvement, and each day we go forward, you know, with post-COVID, hopefully coming up soon, and we get more into a steady way of working, rather than as remote, that our practices continue to improve. So the background I just talked about there, the strategy. What I will take you to is the document. So hopefully you'll all be familiar with this table, which was the appendices that was at the back of the implementation document. It's our plan. So what I've done here is what we would say we've done and what we say we have actually done since the last time we came to you 12 months ago. We said we would develop appropriate mechanisms to continue engaging with our customers. And as a consequence of COVID-19, we have in Lincolnshire accelerated all, as much as possible, IT improvements across the piece, which then has enabled us to also see the benefits of those. So we've continued to develop and evaluate Fix My Street. We've also reviewed the responses, and we've reviewed those responses against the feedback that councillors have provided to us, that members of the public have, to make sure that they are more informative. And we've placed regular informative articles in the Town and Parish Council e-newsletter. So, as I say, work will always continue in that element with Fix My Street as we receive feedback. Respond to customer complaints effectively and efficiently, working to achieve early resolution where possible. So this part of the work, I am really pleased and very proud of what the team have done, because across corporately, across all the services, highways have been one of the significant improvers. We have resolved a lot of our complaints at early resolution. And these reports are reported back to the corporate leadership team and the executive. So that has really, we have seen a significant improvement there. To apply continuous improvement methodology when dealing, to enhance our customers' experience when dealing with and listening to our complaints or our inquiries to an agreed time frame. So as you can see there, we delivered a series of staff roadshows where I led this presentation, and Richard Fennick, our County Highways Manager, attended. And what we did do was clearly articulate our expectations of highway officers when communicating with our customers, councillors, both internally and externally. And many of you did attend a councillor roadshow where I shared my expectations of what I expected from officers. We created a culture where the customer is at the heart of our decision making, but we also recognise we don't always get it right each time. But to me, it's about dealing with them at the time. If we have got an issue, we do look at those individually. We do present high challenge to our officers, you know, why didn't you meet this time frame, etc. But it's in a supportive, it's high challenge, high support. Let's get it right first time. We've been clear about timescales for responding to Fix My Street reports. So as I say, there has been a very clear steer and direction as to what expectations are from officers. We've continued to develop our engagement with our customer groups and to keep them informed of our Future Works programme. And again, although we've had COVID-19, which has prevented some of our planned activities with Team Lincolnshire and the LAUC, we are considering to explore all that we can via Teams, whether that might be via Teams Live, but we are currently looking at those. We've simplified the published programme for surface treatments, and we've worked with colleagues in digital engagement to explore the potential for using Power BI to show programmes more intuitively. We've delivered councillor briefings. Apologies. We were going to deliver councillor briefings following full council in January, but unfortunately, we were unable to do that for the COVID-19. Therefore, as I mentioned earlier, I did deliver 4 councillor events in autumn 2019. How-to guides to provide consistency across the single highway service approach. We did do that. We carried out that piece of work, and what the end result will be new digital processes, and we have produced clear and concise guides for all highway officers to view and to follow. And again, that's very important to me, because you don't know what you don't know. If officers aren't aware of the system or process they are, have to follow to provide timely responses or the support, that's where we get a disjointed service. So there is one single highway service guides to enable officers to follow. Review and draft improve Fix My Street and Customer Service Centre digital responses and templates. I know I mentioned this earlier on in the implementation plan, and we have continued to review these, and we will continue to review them, recognising we're not always going to get it right, but the endeavour is always to provide the best response we can. Finalise new responses to templates with colleagues ready for testing. Again, this is Fix My Street. We reviewed in January, April and September. And development of new processes to enable our officers to respond to non-standard responses. So that's really what we did. Well, if I take you through just these 3 bullet points. So since February 2020, we have provided a personal response on Fix My Street when closing a report, if it is not LCC responsibility. So what many of you may be aware of or may not, and what was happening was we had different functionalities within Fix My Street, and what was happening was our officers were providing very in-depth responses and articulating on specific matters. Unfortunately, what was happening was that information was not getting picked up via the Fix My Street reports. Hence why we can understand people were getting very frustrated, because they were just getting a simple response that didn't give really answers to what their questions were. So what we have done is put a process in place, and we have put a manual process in place at the moment to ensure that those bespoke responses are being picked up and are being put into Fix My Street to ensure that an informative and a correct response is being received. And up to the 30th of September, 3,435 Fix My Street reports have been updated with this personal response. So that to me was quite key, identifying where the issue was, how we're going to put it right, putting in a process, and then being able to move forward and making sure that all our customers get that up to date and informative response, not just a run-of-the-mill response that was happening. So the website is currently being updated, and once completed, we will review the Highways webpage. So that's the corporate Lincolnshire website. So Georgina, our Highways Liaison Manager, is working closely with the LCC website team. We have implemented new web forms to enable customers to apply for highway licensing and permits, as well as submit a Highways claim form. So we've really enhanced the digital offering for anyone wishing to access our website rather than having to wait for a call back. We continue to deliver training and shadowing for our customer service team and our highway officers. And that's where, though we've been restricted by shadowing, we are currently exploring how we can do this via Teams. And we have one of our plans was to publish highway plans and programmes on our website. And we have done. We've published a highway works programme, 2-year rolling, which includes surface dressing, micro asphalt programme, grass cutting programme, weed treatment, etc. We've published all current TROs on a map and proposed TROs in a directory and published section 58 roadwork restrictions, which is access to a PDF map. Review update highway standards, and what we have done, it recently came to committee here, was our highway infrastructure and asset management plan. So we've reviewed the information within there. We've reviewed the enforcement manual and letters. We've reviewed the advance notifications and signage for roadworks to better improve our engagement. What we have recognised, we haven't made as much progress as we would have liked to have done, because with the mobilisation, we went into lockdown just before we were mobilising the Balfour Beatty contract. So that actually doubled, tripled quite a lot of work. So we are at the moment now starting to pick this up. Continue to review our customer inquiry monitoring process and controls. Monitoring of time taken to make initial response to inquiries is monitored quarterly as an Alliance client performance indicator, and that performance indicator is reported through to this committee. So we have got measures in place to monitor. We continue to review our performance management reporting requirements, and again, this comes through to the committee because it's part of our performance indicators. We have undertaken the annual NHT CQC. We're just waiting for the results. We will analyse and then we will bring them back here. Establishing of a highways customer panel. We've not made progress as much as we would have liked to have done, simply because of COVID-19 and getting people into to one place. So we do recognise that is a piece of work we still need to continue. NHT survey results I've talked about. And then the report where we will bring back the findings and use the recommendations from that public satisfaction report to continue to influence work in improving our customer satisfaction. We will, as always, analyse complaints data to ensure trends are monitored on a live basis. And we will look into the reason for the complaint. But as I say earlier in my presentation, the complaints level has reduced greatly due to increased early resolution. Many of the complaints is about potholes, highways infrastructure and asset management plan, and we have been set up to address these. And that's everything, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. I've got nobody indicating in chat to speak, but I think Councillor Renshaw, sorry, I do have somebody, but I think Councillor Renshaw got his hand up. Were you wanting to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm still inoperative on the chat function, but never mind. Just to say that I do feel more confident now in getting the information, and something is working, and it's a vast improvement, and I think it's going to make customers happy. There was one little bit that Karen referred to, and that's in the advanced notifications and signage for roadworks. I had a strange phenomenon. I had signs put out on the main road outside my house, giving advance notice of roadworks, and a fortnight later, the signs were taken down without nothing ever happened. So clearly, that does indicate there is a loss there, and I guarantee that the guys were paid for doing the work, and I bet they charged us for it. But obviously, there's going to be hiccups like that, and I'm not trying to make a political point about that. That these things do happen, and I feel more confident. I did have a problem which obviously I flagged up with Richard Fenwick about an obstruction item yesterday. It was a footway obstruction at high height, which is obviously dangerous to pedestrians, but it was not on a heavily used route. But it's clearly important it gets sorted out. But I had the duty manager come on the telephone to me on a Sunday afternoon, so he obviously thought it was more problematical than it was, and I explained it wasn't. But it's little fine-tuning things, Karen, that obviously need to be taken out. And I'm sure that when these are pointed out to you, they will be taken on board, and they will help to improve the whole system for the benefit of everybody. But thanks for your work, and I do feel a lot more confident now than I did when we started this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Renshaw, could I just ask you if you could email me the details that you referred to where the notice came out, that I could look into it, please, and come back to you.
I'll do my best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I just wanted to give a bit of feedback, very similar to Councillor Renshaw's. I wanted to say thank you and to give the feedback that I feel that the communication with me as a councillor and with many of my residents is vastly improved. You feel much more part of the team. You feel as though you're involved in what's happening in highways in your area, which is very nice. I particularly wanted to raise what you've done on Fix My Street. That's really good. And it's just common sense, but that common sense stuff makes all the difference. And people can always be very be very understanding if they don't, even if they don't get what they want, as long as they know what's going on and as long as they're included. So, I mean, all power to you. I think this is absolutely going in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak on this item before I sum up and make a comment? No. From a personal point of view, I found Fix My Street improved. I found the responses a lot better. I have had one report showing that work had been done where it quite blatantly hadn't been done, but the local highways officer is looking into that to see if that was just a misinterpretation of where it was or which side of the road it was. But in general, things seem to be an awful lot better. In the pre-meeting, I think I mentioned that there was several jobs that I reported were done within a week of having been reported. So not only is the engagement good, the response to getting the work has been good as well. So it's been first class. So I'd like to propose that the committee receive the report. I don't think there's anything additional to add to that. And I would also like to request I'd also like to request that the committee continue to review the customer engagement arrangements on an annual basis. Once again, if anybody wishes to dissent against that, then please enter it into chat. Again, I'll just give you a short while to do that. So we've got nobody wanting to do that. So then I take that as agreement, and thank you very much, Karen.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Item 8, Civil Parking Enforcement Annual Report 2019 to 20. I'd like to welcome Matt Jones, Parking Service Manager, who will introduce the annual report for the civil parking enforcement by the Lincolnshire County Council. Once again, just enter in to speak if you wish to speak. The Scrutiny Committee is invited to consider and comment on the contents of the annual report and support the report being published on the Council's website. So Matt, you're away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope we're all keeping safe and well. What I'll do is I'll go through the report, not in word for word detail, obviously, but I'll give a a quick synopsis of each section within the report. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to read through the content, so I'll go through that now, and happy to take any comments, queries or questions at the end. The layout of the report itself is very similar to our previous annual report from 2018-19. So we start off with an introduction from Councillor Davis, just explaining what the aim of the report is for and how we provide the service. Lincolnshire, as we know, is a very large county. We don't have a huge amount of resource to us, but the resource that we do have, we try to utilise in its most logical manner. And also one of the key elements to our contract with APCOA, who deliver the on-street enforcement for us, was that they also took control of our back office element towards the middle of 2019 as well. We work in partnership with various different people, including APCOA, who I mentioned, but also with Lincolnshire Police. So we've carried out a variety of joint patrols throughout the county. It's something that we've been trying to touch upon a bit more with the police in terms of trying to actually patrol areas in that joint approach to how we can deal with a variety of matters that are kind of linked together itself. Within the report, we touch upon various amounts of feedback that we receive through the course of the year. Obviously, we have a lot of contact with members of the public and also yourselves, all the councillors around the county. So we'd like to highlight some of the positive feedback that we've received over the course of the last financial year, ranging from thanking staff for their help on street and also the benefits to enforcement within the county itself. I've drafted up a section on how and why we issue penalties. I think we're quite accustomed to that now. Without parking enforcement, on-street areas can quite quickly turn into almost a free car park as such, which has a variety of impacts upon local businesses, residents and other implications as well. We do have a variety of residential parking permit schemes dotted around the county in Stamford, Sleaford, Louth and Lincoln, and we patrol all of these as and when we can. More often than not, it is on a daily basis, and we try and ensure that residents and visitors can get parked in close proximity to their house as best as they can. The report on page 131 and onwards, we touch upon some of the services that we offer and some of the implications that can have on the highway itself and parking space availability. So we highlight month by month and via area in terms of what parking spaces have been suspended. That could be for a variety of reasons dependent upon events taking place, essential maintenance work that would enable contractors and utility companies to access the road in a safe manner. We do also offer a waiver permit scheme in place, which is us providing an allowance for a contractor to park on a parking restriction. So again, very open and transparent with what we've issued and where, based upon, again, through the course of the year, so from April 19 through to March 2020. And as I go down the report, we also work in close proximity with our Blue Badge team, especially in regards to disabled Blue Badge misuse. So although this isn't data that we have specifically within parking services, it's data which we've worked and contributed towards with the Blue Badge team, ranging from how Blue Badges have been misused. It could be via an expired Blue Badge or a non-Blue Badge holder utilising a family members, a friends, to what action we can take on the ground to assist the Blue Badge team in managing that. The page 133 just highlights some of the outcomes to that course of action that we've undertaken. Blue badge issuance was up as well from the previous year by just under 1,500. One thing that we've always had accessible on our website was and is an interactive parking map. So a member of the public can access parking restrictions online, which highlights all of the traffic regulation orders. So if you are looking to visit Lincoln or anywhere across the county, it's a good tool to utilise to ascertain where you can park. And it also links in with the district council car parks as well. So it does highlight where someone could park in an off-street area if need be. We touch upon the bike hire scheme. So again, where a vehicle or a member of the public may be driving into a location, we worked with Phil on this in regards to where sites are in regards to the bike hire scheme and how that could be beneficial to the end user. Moving through the report again, now this, although it's in the 2019-20 report in regards to the CCTV vehicle, the trial came to an end towards the end of this, the last financial year. So we've included data in that respect. Penalty charges again were similar, really. I think we've spoken separately many times regarding the vehicle itself, but we wanted to include a section within the report on this because it was obviously a key element to that. One thing which we've developed an awful lot since the publication of this annual report was how a member of the public can report nuisance parking and non-compliant parking. Previously, and as this report shows, there was an email address or an answer phone service available to members of the public to highlight those non-compliant parking instances that are witnessed. So again, we like to highlight how many we've received. So just under 800 in the previous year, and just under 500 we were actually able to action. The vast majority of others related to either non-enforceable parking restrictions. So for example, it could be a damaged sign or line, which obviously we then highlight through to our highways colleagues, or obstruction matters, which were in relation to the police. So that's quite detailed in terms of what we've done in respect to what a member of the public has raised to us. Moving forward to current times, that system has been redeveloped, and there's an online form which is more interactive and provides greater feedback to a member of the public in that respect. The old version, there was no feedback. If we received contact via email, we would reply, but the more common approach of contacting our enforcement contractor direct, there was no service in place to outline what had actually occurred afterwards. That's an improvement from the previous year. Various events we've helped out with over the course of the previous year as well. So we just touch upon those. Not all of them, because there's a large number of them. And one thing which we've tried to highlight in a lot of detail within the report is not just data and statistics and number after number, but what we as a service are trying to implement and improve upon, and how we can create, or at least try to create, a better experience out on the street for a motorist. And the way we can do that is by ensuring that contract that we have in place is monitored correctly, and that we monitor it thoroughly in a manner that we should do. So in terms of innovation and a variety of new developments, we've really built upon our working practices in our office, so within the parking services team, that the way that we extract data and actually review that and then liaise with APCOA to try to improve things where things have gone wrong. I think we can all be open and honest that not everything is undertaken correctly at all times. Mistakes can occur. It's part of human nature, but we Fortunately for us, they are few and far between, and those that do occur, we work upon. Councillor Davis very kindly started this scrutiny meeting earlier on by clarifying that we were awarded the 2018-19 overall winner for the annual report from the Patrol, which is Parking Annual Reports by Councils. Around 300 local authorities outside of London publish these annual reports, and I think a lot of them vary, but there is an awful lot of extremely thorough and detailed reports. So to be selected as the overall winner in terms of content, innovation, and how we monitor our contract was a very proud achievement from my team. So thank you for those comments earlier, Councillor Davis. What we've also looked upon is, and something that I've kind of touched on, is what we're looking to achieve next and in our current financial year. So a section of the report on pages 144, 145 and 146 just details some of the things that we're looking at expanding upon. We have recently gone into a partnership with South Holland District Council, which enables our parking officers to patrol the car parks in Spalding, so in South Holland. So that's very recently come into fruition. And as I scan further down the report, I won't go into detail on this, but we feel it was a worthwhile section to include, was feedback from the officers on the ground. So what benefits and how they feel about undertaking fundamentally a very important role on street, which quite often attracts a lot of negative comments or negative publicity. And we wanted to touch base with them and include how they felt parking enforcement was important and how they've what they've achieved from that on the ground itself. So it's nice to receive that feedback from the team as well. Moving into the more statistical side of things now, on page 152, it's clarification that we issued just under 35,000 penalties last year. It was a fraction less than the previous financial year. I would say that was in part due to lower figures in March due to the COVID implications. So we scaled enforcement back quite drastically, and that impacted upon our overall figures. I think without that, it probably would have been our highest issuance year to date in 8 years. We have included every single type of ticket that can be issued, how many have been issued, and broken down as a comparison between this financial, well, I say this financial year, the 2019-20 year and the 2018-19 year, and also our appeal response times. So how many appeals we've actually received in regards to those tickets issued. There was, again, a fraction under 5,000 challenges were received. We responded to 99% of them within 14 days, which is a very good turnaround time. In part, I touched upon at the start with our notice processing element now being undertaken by APCOA. They have an office based within Lincoln, so having a very localised knowledge has been quite beneficial on that one. Our formal response is just over 1,000. This is an appeal, which is submitted further down the line and that a member of the public has the right to make. So again, we highlight how many decisions have been successful and unsuccessful. Very, very, very comparable to previous years, really. We've always been quite consistent in terms of our decision making, and I think that comes from having very clear policies and procedures in place on how we exercise discretion. We do obviously have a number of cases which are heard by the Traffic Penalty Tribunal, who are an independent group of lawyers that look at parking tickets and reasons for appeals. A member of the public's opinion as to why it should be cancelled, as opposed to the local authority's decision as to why it should stand. So again, quite similar to the previous year, we were successful with 61%, which was 33 of the around 50 cases which were taken through to the tribunal. I think when we compare that nationally, it's we actually have a higher success rate with the tribunal than, not all, but the vast majority of other local authorities. And I think that stems from the work that we put in prior to that stage. Moving towards the end of the report on page 161, we go into a bit of detail regarding the finances side of things. We did make a deficit in 2019-20 of just over £22,000. I have included a section as to why that was. Again, although it was in its very early stages financial-wise for parking services, but in March, our income reduced drastically due to less parking tickets being issued. I think if that hadn't have occurred, we probably would have pretty much broke even or been a fraction over as a surplus. So I think that pretty much covers off the whole report itself. But I'm happy to comment further if anybody's got any queries or questions on that.
Right, thank you, Matt. I'm just seeing a hand up from Councillor Renshaw. I've nobody else asking for questions at the moment. So, Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's an excellent report, and it goes from strength to strength. And Matt knows what I'm going to talk about. It is about the parking, school time parking. And school time parking covers a wide range of time, and it's a continual problem. So local intelligence of when people are ignoring the traffic regulation orders which are in place is very important. And I've got local residents who do keep me informed when this is going on. And because it's the same old answer, isn't it, every time when people are caught parking on double yellow or a yellow line, oh, I'm only going to be here 5 minutes, so it doesn't matter. So, in other words, the county council is wasting its money painting yellow lines. But we all know the reason for that. So, what I'm saying is that we do need to keep taking cognizance of when that local intelligence let us know when this is a problem. So it's good that the parking services are taking cognizance of what's going on, and it's manifested itself in an excellent report. So well done, and well done for the award. You thoroughly deserve it. Thank you very much.
And Councillor Rodney Grockock's got his hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, Mark. Yeah, looking forward. South Holland's looking forward.
Parking. What's classed as nuisance parking, please?
Anything effectively of a non-compliant manner. So it could literally range from a member of the public reporting a car parking all day in a limited waiting bay, or a car in a disabled bay, car on double yellow lines all day. Anything and anything to do with a parking restriction that is being breached, in essence.
Okay. Doesn't cover private driveways then, if people are parking across private driveways?
That is something that we can enforce against. So if there is a driveway, so a drop curb that leads to a garage or someone's drive, we can enforce against that, even if there's no yellow line in place, for example. The only way that we can do that is upon the written request from the resident, because you as a resident can park outside your own driveway and block it if you wish to, or you could allow anybody to do that if you want. But we can enforce against that, but it must be in writing, so we have that on record.
Great, thank you, Matt. So I would like to just compliment you on your 2018-19 success. I think this report should be another award-winning one, so we'll wait and see what happens. Congratulate you and your team. I'd like to propose that the committee receive the report and endorse the transparency it provides on civil parking enforcement activity. I also propose that we support the report being published on the council's website. Once again, I ask for dissenters, and if you wish to dissent, then put it in the chat now, please. Right, I don't see any dissenters, so thank you, that is agreed. Matt, thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
So, we're nearly there. Item 9 is the annual update on Lincolnshire County Council's approach to traffic model and transport strategy developments. I'd like to introduce Sam Edwards, Head of Highways Infrastructure, who will introduce the report which details the purpose and benefits of the County Council's approach to traffic model and transport strategy developments. The Scrutiny Committee is invited to make comment on the actions taken to date and the planned developments for the future years. Sam, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm just looking to share a quick presentation. I'm hoping everyone can see that because my IT has been playing up a little bit.
It's on mine.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so obviously I've written the report and I'm going to take the report as read and I'm just going to pick out a few pertinent bits to update on, and then if they want any sort of questions before about it, we'll leave it to the end. So the three areas is generally about the update on what we've done over the last year, and then looking at our future pipeline of projects. And then finally, just wanted to touch on actually the traffic modelling in use, so to give some examples of how we're using the modelling. So progress to date. So in the last year, I think last year we said we were almost done with the Boston traffic model. That is now complete, as is the Lincoln transport strategy, and the Gainsborough transport strategy is almost complete. And then this financial year, so 1920, we've commissioned a new Grantham traffic model, a new Sleaford traffic model, and the new Skegness and coastal area traffic. So it's Skegness and wider, picking up Mablethorpe and a few other areas. So that's effectively what I'm showing in this programme. So this is the traffic models at the top and the strategies at the bottom. So at the top, the green is what we completed. So there's the Boston completed model in 2019. And then these are the models that we've commissioned this year. So Grantham, Skegness and Sleaford. And then this gives an idea of what we're either doing as a new model or an update to an existing going into the future across the 8 urban areas. Following on for these models is when we'll then, the following year, the plan is to produce the strategy or update the strategy, depending on where we're at on the programme. But as I say, we've completed Lincoln's last year, and we've almost completed Gainsborough. And then next year, after these traffic models are done, we'll look to create new strategies for Grantham, Skegness and the coastal area, and Sleaford. So a little bit about our future pipeline. So sort of three key areas there. So the transport boards, as I think many people are on various different groups, and I talked about last year, but we set up 8 transport boards across the 8 urban areas. Now they're chaired by either Richard Davis or Cleo, and they have local members and local district members, LCC officers and district officers, really to talk about sort of any from kind of the sort of what would be perceived as low-key things to actually potentially large projects and everything transport related. Now, the transport strategies do inform a lot of those discussions, but they're not prescriptive. And actually, we're starting to get through those some really good positive outcomes. And some of the projects that have been talked about with those strategies, we're now looking at funding bids, mainly as it should be joined up between district and council through things like the Towns Fund. So, for example, in Lincoln, we're looking at Wickford Way and Sinsel Bank. We're looking at a number of schemes in Mablethorpe and Skegness. We're also looking in Holbeach, and there's a number of other areas, including Grantham as well. So they're very much discussed at those boards, and the transport strategies support those, and the modelling does as well. So yeah, so we've talked about for a couple of years about these taking shape, and they really are now, and we're starting to see the benefits. The second one about the route action plan. So that's looking at our strategic network across the county. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we produced what was called the A15, 16, 17 Route Action Plan, or RAP. and that was looking at key blockages, whether that's congestion or journey time reliability, safety. And a number of projects came out of that we're actually taking forward. For example, we completed the Sutton roundabout works and the Whole Beach Pinterback Junction we did. We're also looking at, we completed the Holding roundabout as well. And then we're revisiting this. So further than the A15, 16, 17, we're also looking at the A52 and a number of other junctions as well, or routes, corridors. Now that document's due to be complete by March next year. And that will really set our sort of next probably 2, 3, 4, 5 years of projects that we may want to progress from roundabout improvements to whatever really. And that's where the final point comes in is Midlands Connect. You know, they were on earlier talking about, but they have a development fund which we're looking to bid into. This is money to bid to actually develop a outline business case. And the threshold they're looking at is 20 to 25 million. So one of the thoughts, it's not set in stone yet, but one of the thoughts is actually look at the route action plan, look at a suite of projects. There may be 3 or 4, 5 million, but actually look at a suite that complements each other, you know, 4 or 5 roundabouts, maybe in the same area, and look for funding through that way. And that's really hits the principle of the transport strategies and the modelling, that we actually have the base information to support those bids. So we're not starting from this kind of sort of standstill position. We've actually got the evidence, which puts us in a much better position should we go into a competitive bidding process. So the final thing I was going to talk about, a bit different this time, was a bit about modelling. Now, I've introduced you quite a few times and spoken to you quite a few times about traffic modelling, but I've never really taken the time to give some examples. So I thought I'd just take through a couple of diagrammatical examples of what I mean when we're just sort of looking at modelling. So as you'll know, you know, this is Boston. And so there was a piece of modelling that came from the Transport Board, or an idea of actually banning the right turn coming from Witham Place onto Norfolk Street. So currently you can go straight on the right. And what happens if we ban that turn? So this is that junction, Witham Place, Norfolk Street and Fidel. So this is a change in seconds. So what it's saying, if you look at just this junction in isolation and you ban that right turn, you will see a 68-second reduction in queuing time, and 16 for turning left, 16 for going on, and so forth. So you would look at that. You don't need a model to do that. You can look at just the junction. But that's the danger, because you look at it and you think, well, it's a no-brainer, you know, people are queuing less. But this is what the modelling data allows you. So this is a change in number of vehicles. So what you've actually done is, by reducing the time that you're waiting at this junction, the green is additional vehicles, whereas the blue is a reduction in vehicles from the current state. So you reduce the timing, but you're actually therefore encouraging people to use this route. And effectively what you're doing is encouraging people to use this route across here and discouraging them from John Adams Way, because you're distributing the traffic. So it's, I mean, what I didn't include on this one was the change in seconds on the wider network. Now, this is a project that we are looking to take forward, because the idea was actually to relinquish some of the delay on John Adams Way. And although the traffic is increased on there, the time and the congestion hasn't. But you wouldn't know this by just simply looking at one junction. So that gives the evidence of what bidders and funding bodies are looking for, to say, well, okay, that's great, but what does that mean for John Adams Way, or what does that mean for Bargate Roundabout? You know, it gets much broader. So I've got another example here. So this was, again, came out of the Boston Transport Group. So the sole purpose was to alleviate congestion on John Adams Way, to get traffic on John Adams Way and to keep it flowing better. So the proposal was to ban a right turn off Botolph Street onto John Adams Way, to try and free up that flow, reduce the traffic light phasing and get better flows. So I'm just going to zoom in on that one. So this is a change in number of vehicles. So we have stopped people coming down here, Botolph, and turning onto John Adams Way, which is great. But the change in numbers, as you'd expect, is there's going to be fewer vehicles on this route here because they can't turn right. But what it's actually done is encouraged more vehicles to turn off first, to go on Bargate and around. And the traffic is therefore actually turning left, coming down, which is why this is increased, turning around the roundabout and back up, which is why you've got huge, greater numbers on John Adams Way here compared to there, because all the traffic that would have done that is now going on that one. So if you look in isolation, you think, well, okay, you ban the right turn, you improve it, but it's the same, still the same number of vehicles trying to get to the same different destinations. So it doesn't necessarily improve it. And what that basically shows is this is the result of that in change in seconds, is you do actually see a slight change, a reduction in 6 seconds, but ultimately in traffic modelling terms, that's minimal. You wouldn't even notice the impact. So this is where it's really informing our choices of what we do and what we don't do. Because in looking in isolation, you can think, well, you put a right turn on, well, clearly that's definitely going to flow better. But actually, when you're able to use the model and look at the data as it's great, you're not achieving anything. So it's not necessarily the right thing to do. Now, it might be that it informs other things to do. But these, I just wanted to give a few examples of how, and these are quite low-key examples, but how this can help generate A, testing scenarios, and B, generating what we do want to do, and C, informing funding bids, because this is what people want to see. They'll want to see evidenced improvements in order to fund it. So, Chairman, that concludes my presentation, and I welcome any questions at this point.
Thank you, Sam. It's appreciated. It must have been thorough because I've got no questions whatsoever. I've got no hands up. So thank you very much. So I'd like to propose that the committee receive the report and welcome the progress made on the local transport strategies through the work of local transport boards. And once again, we'll go by anybody dissenting, please put in chat. Okay, thank you then. That is agreed. Thank you once again, Sam. So we move on to final item of the day, which is 10 Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee work programme. And this is the final item for Daniel with highways. So I would like to just say to Daniel, thank you very much for all your support, all your help in my time as Vice Chairman of Highways. It has been superb. And I'll open up at the end if anybody wants to embarrass him after he's done his final report. So Daniel, on to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your kind words. The work programme is shown on page 172. The next meeting of the committee is the 14th of December. And there are currently 5 items shown on that report, but I've been informed that the roadside nature reserves wildflower planting item will move to the January meeting. But other than that, the work programme is as shown in the agenda pack. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Daniel. So I have 2 people showing to speak, starting with Councillor Brewis.
Well, mine is a brief one, really, Chairman. It's just completely to echo what you said about Daniel and to wish him all the very, very best. We've always had thorough and complete and competence in seeking your advice both in the committee and outside it. And I'd like to wish him all the very best and join in what you said, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Councillor Jackie Brockway.
Yeah, thanks. Mine's a Daniel comment as well, actually. I'm absolutely disappointed that you're not going to be here anymore. You've done a fantastic job and miss you. You've also been very kind and supportive when you've done your job. I've always had great confidence in you. So keep in touch. Let us know what you're doing and the very, very best of luck to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right, then, Daniel, we'll move on to the last bit, which is the committee is invited to... Sorry, wrong bit. Can I ask that the work programme is approved? Does anyone dissent? Please indicate in chat. So if anybody doesn't like it, let me know now. Right, that looks like it. So that is agreed. Thank you, everybody. This now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you for everyone for in attendance. You may now leave the meeting by using the red phone icon on the taskbar to the end of the call. Thank you all very much.